Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sport and Fan podcast. Today I'm going to talk about the Rugby World Cup that is currently being played. It's quite an interesting one because in the past you usually could tell who was going to win, right? You'd always say it's either going to be Australia, New Zealand or South Africa, or the last two World Cups in 15 and 19, you'd probably say it's either South Africa or New Zealand, simply because it was always so rare, with the exception of 03, it was always Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, right, that had won every World Cup. But this one is a little bit different because there's actually a few teams that could actually win it. There's actually a few Northern Hemisphere teams that could win it. And personally, as much as I hate to say it, Australia isn't going to win it. Personally, I don't think they've got the team to win it. They just, quite frankly, I've gone into it in the past, the problems that Rugby Australia has. There's been going on since the late 90s when they won after the 99 World Cup. They just sat on their hands and thought people would come to them, and then they wonder why they're in the situation that they're in. But New Zealand's at a time at the moment where New Zealand's not playing overly well, to be honest. And as much as I hate to say that as well, being half Kiwi, but there's really, I reckon, about 3 or 4 teams that can truly win it. When I'm looking through the World Cup at the moment, when I really think about it, New Zealand's are more than likely going to be there or thereabouts. They're not going to, I don't think they're just going to roll over. But of course, the first game of the tournament, they got beaten by France, and they got beaten comprehensively. They just weren't in the game. They didn't turn up, and the French did. The French just simply it's the first time New Zealand's ever lost a pool game. They never lost a pool game at any World Cup before. This is the 10th World Cup, and this is the first time they've lost a game. And it lost a game in the pool stages. And again, doesn't surprise me because the French have actually got a good side. So the teams that I think could win it, the French, the Irish, and the South Africans. I think they're the 3 teams that could really go and potentially win the World Cup. Obviously, I would like New Zealand to be there at the end, but it's hard to see them, winning it. Just simply because they just seem to be a bit lost at sea. You can see the talent is there, but tactically they're all over the place at the moment. That first game against the All Blacks, yes, the refereeing was a little bit off, in my opinion, but it was more that the All Blacks, I think, beat themselves in that game. They just kicked away way too much ball for them to win, and you can make an argument of whatever you want about the refereeing, like in that, and where I think it was a little bit too wrestle happy towards the French, but it's just the All Blacks didn't do anything to help themselves. They really threw nothing at the French, and as a result, they ended up in the situation that they were. It was not a good game to watch if you're an All Black supporter. And traditionally, for whatever reason, the All Blacks have traditionally played poorly against the French. I don't know why. It's just, they must be just one of those teams that the All Blacks don't play well against. So, if they don't maybe if they don't play against the French in the final, like if they get up against, I don't know, maybe the Irish or the South Africans or something, they could potentially win it. But if they play the French, I think the French will win it. The obvious other big hitters in this World Cup. When you think about when it comes to the World Cup, you always think about England. England is one that, but looking at the English recently, they may have been the Argentinians just recently in the first game, their first game in the pool stages, but I just can't see where in that game they 3-0 again. They just went to, yes, they may have had a red card in that game, but they weren't able, they got beaten by Fiji just before the World Cup started, and they've been struggling for the last, really since the last World Cup. They had they lost to South Africa in the 2019 World Cup, and a lot of the big names haven't really they're kind of stuck where they were, if you know what I mean. They haven't really evolved, and they haven't none of those players have really taken their game to the next level. That's where the South Africans and the Irish and the French have been playing so well, is because they were able to take their game to the next level. They're constantly evolving, and that's where the All Blacks had been so good up until the last few years. They were always evolving, right? They were always one step ahead of where they were previously, right? Tactically, they would always change. And that's where, traditionally, once you win a World Cup, with the exception of really the All Blacks in 2011 and 2015, you win a World Cup and then you don't traditionally play well in the next one. You don't go on to win the next one with, for example, the All Blacks didn't make the final in 91 after winning it in 87. Australia got knocked out, I believe, in the quarterfinals in 95 after winning it in 91. South Africans didn't do overly well in 99. But then it was actually interesting. So the Australians, they could have won that 03 World Cup. And it was only for Wilkinson, but they just, again, tactically they should have won that game, but they just tactically look wrong. And I know then England would go on to make the final in 07 against South Africa, but South Africa again blew them off the park. And in that final, as much as they didn't score a try. And then you think about, South Africa in 2011 played pretty poorly. Got knocked out in the corners. I believe Australia beat them in the quarterfinals, and then they, it was just and then New Zealand 19. So it was just, it's always hard to back up because you got everyone vying for you to knock you off that top mantle. But South Africa did have a big loss with Malcolm Marx being out injured. He is a big loss for South Africa. He could be someone that could potentially be the difference between South Africa, maybe only making the quarterfinals and going on and winning it. It's strange to say that about a hooker. Usually you think about it, it's usually a 5'8" or a fullback or something, or a back row that you'd really think has a big influence. But if you go back and watch both the semi-final against Wales and the final against England, Malcolm Marx, when he came on in both those games, the momentum completely changed, and yes, the semi against Wales was pretty close, and it wasn't a blowout, but it just seemed to a lot of things seemed to change when he went on, and it was just South Africa. As much as, like I said, the game was close, they never really looked like they were going to lose. Once he came on, it would have had to be something spectacular from Wales to go on to win that game. And if you then go on and watch the final, it was much the same. It was momentum started to change, and a lot of people will say, well, the whole pack was changed in both games, so it wasn't, well, essentially the whole pack. They had went with a 6-2 bench. So they're like, oh, the whole forward pack, they had a whole fresh forward pack, and it changed. But I just thought in that final they played tactically a lot better when he came on. And yeah, it was just he threw that pass to make the break down the sideline, which led to the first South African try. And I actually remember it was just leading up to that. It was because he came on not long before that, and I just noticed that the South Africans were getting a little bit of momentum leading up to that try. And I'm not exactly sure when Malcolm Marx came on. But I remember the people that I was watching it with, I said, I wonder if Malcolm Marx has come on, because the momentum's actually starting to change. And sure enough, he had come on. And South Africa would go on and score that first try. I believe it was Mbipi from memory. And yeah, and then he could so it was just those little, he just does a lot of, he's basically a back row that plays in the front row. He's got the skill set to play in the back row, and yeah, and that losing him is going to be a big loss for South Africa. That could be just I believe they're playing the Irish in the next game. In the next full game, I should say, yeah, which they are. They're playing on at 5 a.m. Sunday Australian time, and that should be actually one of the better pool games that we have in this World Cup. Because if you go through a lot of the remaining pool games, there's not many top level games that you usually see in the pool stages. You just think, usually the best two teams, but having a look at the remaining games, for example, tomorrow at 5 a.m. we've got England and Japan. You've got, South Africa's, they're playing at 11 p.m. Australian time, so 11 p.m. tonight. They're playing Romania. They're going to demolish Romania. Ireland beat them 80-8, so, personally, I think it won't be too much of a different scoreline in this game. I think the Saffers are going to win that easy. Australian and Fiji, which is 1:45 Australian time, that game could be anything, because both the Australian and the Fijians, if the Fijians play like they did in the last game against Wales, I won't be surprised if the Fijians actually get up. Yes, the Australians had a good win in the first game, but this Fijian side has got an upset in them, and I think that might be the one. England, Japan, average game. I don't think that's going to be much of a game. Just looking at these games, I'm looking at them, and there's the only, like I said, the only real game I think that could be a, top shelf game would be the Irish and the Irish and the South African team. This game, I should say. You might get a game in the Japan-Argentina game, but I think that game could determine who might actually end up winning it, because I'm not sure how the finals work if the South Africans top the pool. I don't know if they'll be on the same side as the French or the All Blacks, but that could be one of the best games, whether it be in the finals or in the pool stages, and that could be anything. Like I'm hoping for it'd be actually nice to see that because this is by far the most competitive World Cup I can remember. Like because it was always the one Northern Hemisphere would go on a run, and then they would get, with the exception of 03, would end up getting beat. They would either get beaten in the semi or they would get beaten in the final, and because it was always because this was basically what happened in the last World Cup. People said, the Irish, they're going to go on a run. What happened? They got absolutely decimated in the quarterfinal. But I think the Irish are actually better this time round than what they were that last World Cup. So most wide open, and I'm actually interested to see who wins it because, like I said, you get three that you could almost be certainty as to at least one of them makes it, with the Irish, French, and South Africans, and you could throw New Zealand because that's the thing with the All Blacks. Like everyone always writes them off, right? They're gonna have another choke, right? They can, with the exception of 15, they only can win the World Cup at home. They can only do this, that, the other thing. So they could be there or thereabouts. With Foster as coach, I unfortunately just can't see it. Australians, no. Fijians, you never know what they can do. They can throw you a spanner in the works. It was a shame that they lost to Wales, actually. That would have been really good to see them beat Wales when they, unfortunately, with the drop ball. But, I'm interested to hear what everyone else thinks about this World Cup because this is a very strong competition this year. And, it's actually quite interesting because there's a few other teams that are, they either haven't played in the World Cup at all or it's the first time they're playing in a while, like Romania, Portugal. Like, yes, these teams are not going to win the games, but not going to win really any games. But I really hope that these teams continually get better, so it becomes better at the world stage. I would actually like to see them play more against the top teams more often because it's a much better game when you think that, because if you cast your mind back 7 or 8 years ago, like, it was always, I know Japan won that World Cup, beat South Africa, so let's even go back to 2011. Japan got beaten by New Zealand something like 87-7 or something like that. They got beaten by about 80 points. They had 80 points on them. And, in Namibia, they regularly have 70, 80, 90, 100 points put on them. Who really wants to, this is supposed to be the pinnacle of our sport. No one wants to see massive blowouts. Like, the Irish and Tonga game this morning, unfortunately the Tongans just ran out of gas, and the Irish scored a couple of, they scored 2 or 3, they scored about 2 or 3 late tries, and the score blew out, to what it did. But, that game was a lot more competitive than the 59-16 scoreline. But, what's the game that you'd rather watch? Like that first game, 27-13, where the game was relatively close majority of the game, or Ireland and Romania where it's 82-8. Like, if we can get that score to, and it's not going to happen overnight. I realise that. It's not going to be a, next World Cup. It might take 2 World Cups. It may take 3 World Cups for those teams to get to a standard where, they're competitive. But if they play more against, the European teams, the southern, in the top Southern Hemisphere teams, like if they
play against, Six Nation teams a lot more, and there's a lot more international games. A lot more people will be wanting to go to those games, and once we get to the World Cup, you won't be seeing the 82-8 scorelines, because quite frankly, that shouldn't be happening at a World Cup. Like if we get I would rather see that score 22-8, right? Like because it's a much more enjoyable game to watch, and I think that's where we need to go. Like if we can get a lot of these bottom teams competitive, like. For example, like, look at the soccer, right? Australia's 27 in the world or whatever it is at the moment, in the men's. And they beat, who was it? Denmark, I think it was, in the last FIFA World Cup. And who's a top 10 team. And do you think that would ever, like a team that's ranked, I'll just bring up the IRB rankings at the moment. But if you think about it, like, I think Australia's 7, I think. I'll just confirm this. But could you imagine whoever's ranked 27 in the world beating, Australia? Like, I couldn't. Like, I think it would be an absolute demolition. Like, and so the 7th place team in the world is actually Australia. So could you imagine this 27th place team in the world is the Netherlands? Could you imagine the Netherlands beating Australia? I couldn't. No, I don't. Like, I honestly don't think they could. And like, you're never going to get like some of these lower teams that are ranked, 100th in the world or whatever, that to be competitive against the top 10 teams. But for example, how many people know that China's got a team, for example? Like, if they could get a solid team there, and if, we could get, a few of these other countries that have got good, big populations, like if we could get Mexico going as well as some of these other Southern Hemisphere teams, Germany, Belgium and that, you only need a few of these teams to become, you get a foothold. These are all good, strong countries. And then all of a sudden, you'll see the World Cup, because you don't want to see the same teams winning over and over again. And if these teams, because that's why people are so invested in this World Cup, because there's 4 teams that can really win it. And that's you can say Irish, South, well, really, you would say 3, with the 4th one as a bit of the dark horse with New Zealand. But, that's why, people are saying, oh, it's someone different. It's not just Australia. It's not just Ireland. It's not just South Africa. There's a Northern Hemisphere team. And I think that's better for it benefits the World Cup. Because the more and more popular it gets, more countries want to host it. Like, for example, I believe the 2031 one is actually in the US. Now, I don't even know. I don't think the US is even in this World Cup, let alone competing. Looking at the pool stages. There's not even a Northern Hemisphere team. Sorry, North American team in the World Cup. So, you think about it, there's no Mexico with a population of 180 million. There's no US, the 330, biggest economy in the world. Canada, one of the wealthiest countries as well. They're not in it. Imagine losing those markets, because you lose those markets, people don't care, right? If you tell an American they're in the World Cup, a Rugby World Cup, you're going to get a percentage of the rugby people that don't even like rugby watching, right? Just look at, for example, the Matildas in this World the latest Women's World Cup. So many people watched that World Cup in Australia simply because the Australians were doing well, and they were in the World Cup. Now, think about it's going to be the same thing if the US is in it, right? The US will the same thing will happen in the World Cup if it's there, because you're going to get people that will watch it, and if we can get these, and especially if they become competitive, it's one of the fastest growing sports in the US. I believe it's the fastest growing sport in college over there. Um, I just think there's nothing to lose because you want to have people that that you think they can win it, because you get a bigger TV audience, which means more revenue, more sponsorship, and it's better for everyone. I don't think rugby is ever going to overtake soccer as the world's biggest sport, but the soccer players earn more in like a month than what the rugby players earn in a year. And if we can get that where there's such a big disparity, you're going to get more athletes come to rugby and watch rugby, and that's the benefit for everybody, right? And I think, and then once the money comes in, that's where you get a better World Cup. You get a better product, and people just want to watch it. And that's what I would love to see. Where I just don't think, they're going to win it. They're going to, it's predictable. And yeah, that's what I think. I'm interested to hear what everyone else thinks about this. And yeah, until next time, have a good one.